My perfect sister stole my identity and used my inheritance to fund her lavish lifestyle. I never thought I'd be writing a post like this, but here I am, utterly shell-shocked and seeking advice from strangers on the internet because my entire world has just imploded. This is a long one, so please bear with me. For as long as I can remember, my older sister, Amelia, has been the golden child. She was beautiful, effortlessly popular, academically brilliant, and seemingly destined for greatness. I, on the other hand, was always just me. Average grades, a few close friends, and a quiet passion for art that no one in my family really understood or encouraged. My parents, while never overtly cruel, always held Amelia up as the example, the one to emulate. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" was a phrase I heard countless times throughout my childhood and adolescence. It wasn't malicious, I don't think, but it chipped away at my self-esteem, leaving me feeling perpetually overshadowed and inadequate. Amelia went off to a prestigious university, graduated with honors, and quickly landed a high-powered job in finance. She married her college sweetheart, David, a seemingly charming and successful man from a well-to-do family. Their lives were a picture of perfection, meticulously curated and displayed on social media for all to admire. They lived in a beautiful house, took exotic vacations, and drove luxury cars. My life, in comparison, was much more modest. I pursued my art, struggled to make ends meet with freelance work, and lived in a small apartment. I was content, though, or at least I thought I was. I had a wonderful partner, Mark, who loved me for who I was, and I was slowly but surely building a life that felt authentic to me. The first crack in Amelia's perfect facade appeared about 2 years ago. My maternal grandmother, a truly wonderful woman who had always been my biggest champion, passed away. She had been ill for some time, and her passing, while heartbreaking, was not entirely unexpected. What was unexpected, however, was the substantial inheritance she left me. My grandmother had always been a quiet investor, and it turned out she had amassed a considerable fortune, a good portion of which she bequeathed specifically to me. She knew about my artistic aspirations and, in a beautiful letter she left behind, expressed her wish for me to use the money to pursue my dreams without financial constraints. It was a life-changing sum, easily over $1 million, that I was ecstatic, but also a little overwhelmed. I decided to be responsible. I paid off my student loans, put a significant amount into a high-yield savings account, and invested a portion with a financial advisor. The rest, I earmarked for a down payment on a small studio space and to fund my art projects. I told my parents and Amelia about the inheritance, of course, but I kept the exact amount vague. My parents were pleased, if a little surprised, that Grandma had been so generous with me. Amelia, however, seemed different. She offered congratulations, but their longer, lingering looks, a subtle shift in her demeanor that I couldn't quite place at the time. Fast forward to a few months ago. I started noticing strange things. Small discrepancies in my bank statements. A credit card bill for purchases I hadn't made. At first, I dismissed them as errors, or perhaps even my own forgetfulness. I'm not the most meticulous record keeper, and I assumed I'd simply misremembered a transaction. But the discrepancies grew, becoming more frequent and larger in value. There was a charge for an expensive designer handbag from a boutique in a city I hadn't visited. Then a plane ticket to a luxury resort. Panic started to set in, and I contacted my bank and credit card companies, explaining the situation. They launched investigations, and that's when the true horror began to unfold. It wasn't just my credit card, it was my entire financial identity. Someone had opened new credit cards in my name, taken out a small loan, and even changed the mailing address for some of my existing accounts. My carefully protected inheritance, the money my grandmother had left me, was being siphoned away, the police were involved, and the investigation was harrowing. I felt violated, betrayed, and utterly terrified. Who would do this to me? I racked my brain, going over every person I knew, every interaction, every possibility. It couldn't be Mark. He had access to my accounts, but he was the most trustworthy person I knew. It couldn't be my parents. They wouldn't dream of it. The only person left, the only one who seemed to have a plausible motive, was Amelia. But it couldn't be. Not my sister, the golden child. My mind refused to accept it. Then, the detective called. They had a suspect. They wouldn't give me a name, citing privacy laws, but they told me they had traced the fraudulent activities back to a specific individual. They asked if I knew anyone who fit a certain description, someone who might have access to my personal information, my social security number, my birth certificate. My heart sank. Every piece of evidence, every gut feeling, pointed to Amelia that I confronted her, not directly at first, but subtly. I asked if she had any unusual expenses lately, if she had been struggling financially. She laughed it off, saying everything was fantastic and that she and David were planning another trip to Europe. Her dismissiveness, combined with the detective's increasingly pointed questions, solidified my dread. Finally, the police had enough evidence. They issued a warrant. And then, the call came that shattered my world completely. It was the detective. They had arrested Amelia for identity theft, grand larceny, and fraud. My own sister. The full scope of her deception came out during the interrogation and subsequent legal proceedings. She had been struggling financially for years, despite the outward appearance of success. David's business had taken a downturn, and they were deeply in debt. Instead of facing their problems, Amelia had chosen to maintain their lavish lifestyle by any means necessary. She had seen my inheritance as her solution. She had, over time, meticulously gathered all my personal information. When I told her about the inheritance, she saw her opportunity. She had been opening accounts in my name, transferring money from my savings, and using my identity to fund their extravagant vacations, expensive clothes, and even to make payments on their house and cars. She had even managed to intercept some of my mail by temporarily changing the address on some accounts. The betrayal was monumental. It wasn't just the money, though that was a devastating loss. It was the emotional devastation, the feeling that my own sister, the one I had always looked up to, had so casually and cruelly exploited my trust. My parents were equally devastated, though for different reasons. They were horrified by Amelia's actions, but also, I think, embarrassed. Their perfect daughter, a criminal. The carefully constructed facade of their perfect family had crumbled, not just for me, but for them too. Amelia's defense was pathetic. She claimed she was borrowing the money, that she intended to pay me back. She blamed David, saying he had pressured her, though the evidence clearly showed she was the orchestrator. She even tried to play the victim, saying she felt overlooked and that my grandmother had always favored me. It was a desperate attempt to shift blame, and it made me feel sick to my stomach. David, meanwhile, claimed he had no idea what was going on. He said he thought Amelia was just being fiscally irresponsible, not criminal. I don't believe him for a second. How could he not notice the sudden influx of money, the unexplained purchases? I suspect he was complicit, or at the very least, willfully ignorant. But the police couldn't find enough direct evidence to charge him, much to my frustration. The legal process has been slow and agonizing. Amelia eventually pleaded guilty, largely due to the overwhelming evidence against her. She was sentenced to prison, a sentence that felt both too harsh and not harsh enough at the same time. Too harsh for my sister, but not harsh enough for the person who had stolen my identity and my peace of mind. Now, I'm left to pick up the pieces. My finances are a mess, though thankfully, with the help of lawyers, I'm slowly recovering some of the stolen funds. The emotional scars, however, run much deeper. I've been in therapy, trying to process the betrayal, the anger, the profound sadness. I've had to cut off all contact with Amelia. My parents are caught in the middle, trying to navigate their relationship with both of us. They visit Amelia in prison, which I understand, but it also hurts. It feels like they're still choosing her, even after everything. Mark has been my rock through all of this. He's been patient, understanding, and incredibly supportive. He's helped me navigate the legal system, been there for every breakdown, and reminded me of my own strength. I don't know where I'd be without him, but here's where I need advice. How do I move on from this? How do I trust anyone again, especially family? My parents keep trying to push for reconciliation with Amelia, saying she's learned her lesson and that family is family. But how can I reconcile with someone who so thoroughly betrayed me, who stole my identity and my future? Every time I think about it, I feel a surge of anger and a deep sense of hurt. I don't want to be a bitter person, but I also don't want to be a doormat. Part of me feels guilty for putting her in prison, even though I know it was her actions that led her there. Is it wrong to feel that way? Am I being too unforgiving? I just can't imagine ever looking at her the same way again, let alone having a relationship with her. The trust is completely shattered, and what about my relationship with my parents? They're clearly grieving the loss of their perfect family image, and I feel like I'm constantly being asked to compromise my feelings for their comfort. How do I set boundaries with them without alienating them entirely? I love them, but I also feel like they're not fully understanding the depth of my pain and the severity of Amelia's actions that I'm trying to rebuild my life, to focus on my art, to heal. But this dark cloud hangs over everything. I constantly feel like I need to be vigilant, to check my accounts, to be suspicious of everyone. It's exhausting. Has anyone been through something similar? How did you cope? How did you rebuild your trust and your life after such a profound betrayal from a family member? Any advice on navigating these complex family dynamics would be greatly appreciated. I feel so alone in this, even with Mark by my side. I just need to know if it's possible to truly heal from something like this, and what that healing process even looks like.